Hey everyone, obviously it's me. I always feel like, what is the point in doing, an introduction in these videos? It's like, you know who I am. Like, why do I have to introduce myself every time? But then at the same time, you're like, well, if you don't introduce yourself, it's just kind of awkward to start the video like, hey, let's jump right in. This week, I wanted to talk to you about writing short fiction. For the sake of this video and these tips, it probably works best if you keep it between 500 to 1,000 words or so. Any longer, and these rules kind of start to become a little bit more flexible, and you can kind of bend them to what you're trying to work with. So when you're writing microfiction, you're trying to take a very small idea and make it entertaining in a short space of time. Therefore, one of the most important things that you have to do is keep it brief. Brevity. You have to make sure that what you're saying is succinct and you're saying it clearly and concisely. Too many words and you will completely lose your reader, and it won't feel like you actually accomplished anything in your story. It'll just feel kind of like a jumbled collection of words, and that's really not the point you want to get across. Number two, speaking of brevity, choose just one theme. Just one theme to work with. So, for example, with some of my flash fiction pieces, I chose the theme of dying. There's one called The Phoenix, in which I wrote about a woman who has ovarian cancer, and it's like her last moments that she's kind of hallucinating before she dies. So I didn't go into her whole history of how she got cancer, or very intimate feelings about the whole process. It was just sort of a reflection of what was going on with her as she died and what she was seeing and how she was feeling at that moment, with little maybe bits of her past sprinkled in, just so that you kind of had a cohesive idea of her as a character. She seemed a little bit more three-dimensional. It was very brief. The whole thing is maybe 500 words. Number three, or three in some countries, choose your words wisely. Combine your words. Instead of saying something like very large, say something like huge. Okay, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but when you're working with a small space and you have a low word count, you need to make sure that you're saving words wherever you can. Plus, it's kind of a good tip in general. If you can use one word that's more impactful than a couple of words to say the same thing, it's generally a better choice to go with that one word. I mean, think about it. Very large or huge? Which one, is more of a punch in the face to you when you're reading it? Very large seems just kind of like, it's big, whatever. Huge is like, whoa, in my opinion anyway. Another way you can keep your word count lower is by avoiding excessive dialogue tags most of the time, and this is a pretty good tip for fiction in general, but especially with the shorter fiction. Saying things like he said, she said, they said is probably preferable to saying things like he said jokingly, she yelled angrily, stuff like that. I mean, you can just try and keep it to one thing. Usually said works best. Sometimes yelling or whispering or something like that might be appropriate as well. Just keeping it simple there. 4, do not do an excessively long backstory for any of your characters. This is something I feel like a lot of writers kind of struggle with, because they want you to know all these interesting things they've come up with for their characters. They want you to know their histories and their first love, and the fact that one time when they were 5, they went to the zoo and they saw an elephant, and elephants became a theme in their life. Okay, this is really boring. I don't know who would read that story, but point being, you see where I'm going with this. It's not necessarily important for the reader to know that unless the story itself centered around our elephant-loving protagonist. 5, don't work with multiple themes or high concept ideas. So in a short story where you're talking about the end of the world as perceived by a cockroach, this would probably be just one little blip in that cockroach's life, right? So you're going to be writing about maybe this cockroach's thoughts on what's going on right now, worries about the future, maybe a slight reminiscing of how the world came to be because that cockroach has seen it all, and that cockroach will continue to see it all, because those things never die, and that's the whole point of your story, right? So you choose that theme of like observing desolation or dystopia or whatever, and you just focus on that. 6, limit your characters. When you're writing a short story or microfiction, you don't have the space to entertain a lot of characters, because as we've already talked about, you have to keep your characters past pretty brief. You have to keep your descriptions pretty brief. So if you are trying to write about 6 different characters in the space of 500 words, it's probably not going to work. For the most part, it's best to probably stick to 1 to 2 characters so that it fits within your space and you have enough time to develop those characters in a meaningful way and have them interact with each other in a meaningful way. 7, don't do high concept ideas. I kind of touched on this, but I want to make sure that I talk about it in a very clear way. High concept ideas take a lot of time to develop. There's a lot of details, maybe a lot of world building, a lot of background that you have to give, and things that you need to set up to tell your story in an engaging and exciting way. Microfiction is engaging and it is exciting, but not because of those factors. It's engaging because it's exciting, you can finish it in a few minutes, and your brain gets that kind of immediate little dopamine hit of like, wow, what a twist in that story. That was fantastic. Without putting in all the extra work of reading, like, a novel over the course of days. Number 8. So plot-wise, there should obviously still be some type of conflict, whether that's the character experiencing a conflict internally, or maybe it's more of a character versus environment story where the character is trying to survive and needs to overcome some small problem and figure out a way to keep him or herself from falling into further trouble. That being said, the story should still have an arc. There should be a beginning, a middle, and an end. The character might start off thinking one thing and then feeling another way by the end, or you might do something where the character's life is altered irrevocably in just a few words. I've read stories where it's a short murder story, so in the space of just a few words, a character goes from living life and making plans and dreams to being dead on the sidewalk. So there's a lot of things you can do with very few words, but you have to just make it arc, keep it brief, and just focus on that one little plot twist versus writing all these things that weave together these intricate plots. It just doesn't work for short fiction, and the sooner you understand that, the better your short fiction is going to become, guaranteed. Number 9. Now, if you're struggling with ideas because you're used to writing novels or higher concept ideas, then I challenge you to take a word, a single word, and write a story based around that. So you could just open up a dictionary to a random word, and it might be, rust. That word then can be incorporated into your story somewhere, like you have to use that word, or you could write a story with that type as a title, or you could write a story thinking about it as a concept. So is it color? Is it process of aging? Is it being weathered out in facing the environment? Something like that. Think of a way that you can interpret it and turn it into a concept. Some people think visually, so they like to look up photos to use for a prompt. Other people like to think of words and then turn those into concepts. And so others might actually want to take a prompt that's already written out for them, like a cockroach is facing the end of the world and is reflecting on his past. But what is he going to do about the future? Number 10, the last one. You need to keep an eye on your plot. So make sure, like we talked about that arc, make sure it moves from point A to point B without diverging anywhere and going off on a tangent at point C, then moving back around to point A, point 5, and that's not even a letter. It's like a half letter. Number C. It doesn't make any sense. You don't want to do that. Don't go to 8.5. Nobody wants to read 8.5. You simply need to move from point A to point B, tell the story in a clear way with limited characters. You need to choose a concept that you can fit into that limited amount of space. Use language that is descriptive and impactful. Utilize brevity when you are writing your scenes and your sentences and the way that you arrange your paragraphs even. You want someone to read through this in a quick way. You don't want them to be stumbling over one ginormous paragraph of like just text. You want them to be able to read through it smoothly and have it flow easily in one ear and out the other in the mind. Just devour that story, essentially. Limit your backstory. Do some kind of prologue or epic thing that just doesn't fit into a small space. Put a wicked twist toward the end. That's the hallmark of short fiction. The character either needs to come to a very meaningful or impactful decision, take a meaningful or impactful action, or there needs to be some kind of thing the reader totally wasn't expecting. Take someone's expectations and play with them a little bit, whether you want to surprise them or just leave them thinking, or make a point that's going to stick with them for a while because it's so emotional and relatable that anyone could apply it to their lives or their stories. Okay, so those are my 10 quick tips for writing microfiction. So tiny fiction to flash fiction to short stories, I would say no longer than 1,000 words. For tips on writing short stories that are longer than 1,000 words, I'm going to put together another video because I would say that these rules really don't apply to fiction past the 1,000 word point. You actually have more room to do some of these things that I was telling you not to do with these tips. If you haven't bought my poetry book yet, it is out on Amazon now. There's probably something you'll enjoy in there. If you haven't watched it yet, I'm going to link my video about why you should like poetry. And I also have some other tips about writing short stories and character development and things that you might want to be mindful of when you're writing fiction. So I will also link those. And I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next time. Bye.